we're going to be talking about the games of 2020. We talked about the larger industry trends and kind of what our personal goals are for this year, but obviously the reason we do this podcast is because of the games. And 2020 is an interesting year. Obviously, the year before it's the year of a new console generation. But we talked about this a little bit at the tail end of 2019. So much was delayed from 2019 to 2020 that 2020 actually is shaping up to be a massive year for a lot of games and developers. So I want to talk about.
Appreciate for one moment that Death Stranding was not one of those games.
I know, that's the most mind-blowing thing of 2020 2019. Game of the generation. So I just want to talk about what our personally most anticipated games are, what we're most interested in releasing this year. And I obviously posted a list for you guys in terms of what's coming out in 2020. I'm not going to run through it because I think a lot of people know what is going up, and we're mostly just going to be talking about this from a personal standpoint. What are you guys anticipating coming out in 2020? What are you actually excited to play and get your hands on?
I've got I couldn't narrow my list down to 3. Is that okay?
No, go for it.
Oh, was there a caveat in the show notes to 3?
There was not.
Okay, great.
I thought you were only asking for 1. So
no, you can take this and run with it.
So there are 3 that I'm really looking forward to for vastly different reasons.
Okay.
The first one is Halo Infinite because, as I've mentioned many times, that game was gaming for me for all of my teen years and well through college, and I was not super thrilled with the last couple of entries in the franchise, and I think that 343 really, it seems to me that they really paused and took a step back and re-examined things, and so I'm really excited to see what Halo Infinite is even going to be. I'm hopeful that it's going to be more than just another standard release of a Halo game. I think it has to be, and so I just want to see what that new Halo is going to be.
Yeah, there's not a place in gaming right now for we're going to release a 2-part here's our multiplayer here. Like Call of Duty is still kind of getting away with it somehow, but I really think that's just off of who Call of Duty is and what they've built. Halo, I don't think has and also Call of Duty comes out every year, so they have a natural point of whereas Halo doesn't have that. So yeah, I'm not sure if old school Halo has a place today in terms of release structure and style.
It's an unknown game. It's an unknown quantity still.
Yeah,
and I'm sure we'll see more of it this year at E3. But yeah, it is definitely a game I'm more interested in than anticipating. I'll say that.
Yeah. In terms of a game that I'm pretty sure about what I'm getting, Dying Light 2 is the thing I'm most excited for. Dead Island was a series that I loved. I'd love to see another one of those someday, maybe, probably not. Dying Light was really, it felt like a spiritual successor to Dead Island. It was a great game, so unique, so terrifying.
Too. Underrated, I feel like.
Yeah, that game freaks me out in a way that I love horror games, and I can handle being scared a lot. I think it's hilarious. I have a great time being scared in games, but Dying Light was a game when in the missions where you had to go out in the streets at night. It was just too much for me sometimes, and I had to turn it off.
Yeah, also had a really great multiplayer component.
I never actually tried it.
They had a lot of that asynchronous Left 4 Dead aspect to it, where teams played as the infected, teams played as the humans.
Okay,
neat. It was a great game.
And then my final thing that I'm looking forward to is it's because I don't really have any games that I just relax playing anymore. And a lot of mobile games like to market themselves as such, but really they get stressful and they're a bunch of stuff you have to keep up with. Animal Crossing, man. I can't wait to just relax in an Animal Crossing game this year.
Nice. Not on my list.
No, not on my list either, so I'm glad you put that on there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'll let you go, Luke, because I think we're going to have a lot of overlap in terms of our what we're anticipating.
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got probably like 7 listed here, 6 or 7.
Go for it.
But hey, my New Year's resolution is to play more games, so it fits. First is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I loved Ori and the Blind Forest. So anything more from that franchise, I'm all about. So bring it on. Probably going to go back and replay Ori and the Blind Forest at some point to get ready.
Which is on Game Pass.
Which is on Game Pass, but it's also on Switch. And
true.
I wouldn't recommend playing it first on Switch.
No.
But if you're gonna replay it, why the hell not? You know. Second is Bleeding Edge. As a guy who loves competitive games, Overwatch style games, the idea of a like full on melee Overwatch-esque game is very compelling to me. Again, with Ninja Theory kind of doing something totally different than what they did with Hellblade. I'm very fascinated by what that game is.
Yeah, man. When we heard they were working on something else, never in a million years would I have contemplated that it might be something like Bleeding Edge.
Ninja Theory are a really intriguing studio if you look at the games they've put out. Like they did the DMC reboot or whatever it was, and then they've done like Odyssey Journey to the West or whatever it was, which like had Andy Serkis in it and was like really narratively driven on the PS2. That game is awesome. So they really have a diverse catalog of games. They're all third person, obviously, third person action stuff, but yeah, man, they could be killing it this year. They could be the Respawn of this year.
Mm-hmm. The third is Cyberpunk. I mean,
yes.
How can you not be excited for Cyberpunk? It's going to be awesome. We can talk about this maybe in the post show, but The Witcher 3, the Witcher Netflix series has me wanting so bad to go back and play through the DLC for The Witcher.
I want to talk to you about this.
The engagement numbers have spiked as a result.
Yes, it's higher than when it launched.
I didn't realize that
on Steam. Yeah.
So,
but just one quick word on Cyberpunk.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the game I will be spending the most time with. This game could literally have just been Keanu in your ear, like Keanu ASMR, and I would have played it for 100 hours. But
I disagree with this statement.
There's obviously a lot more game to it than that. This is, I'll crisscross here, but that's easily my most anticipated game of the year, which is mind-blowing considering what else is coming out this year.
Yeah. Well, the next one on my list is my most anticipated, and that is The Last of Us Part 2. Without a doubt.
That's the only other competition for it.
Yeah, one of my favorite games of all time. My wife is excited about it. She was very pissed that it got delayed because she was always asking me, like, is there a release date for The Last of Us yet? And then we finally got one, and then like a month later it was delayed and she was like, what the fuck? So that'll be a cool experience because she'll sit down and watch me play through the whole thing, which is not something she normally does. I have Halo Infinite on my list as well. I'm kind of, Call of Duty in a lot of ways, like the World at War, Modern Warfare, was a big part of my kind of gaming, part of growing up in gaming. But Halo, for me, like when I think about the memories that I have gaming, Halo is the thing. And I just really want that franchise to recapture that, where it's just like a bunch of us getting on, wanting to play. So I'm really, really curious as to what that is. And then Ghost of Tsushima is on my list as well, just because I've been intrigued by every piece of content that's come out about that game so far, and I'm excited to see what it actually is when we get it.
Yeah, my list is remarkable. It's very similar. Obviously, Cyberpunk is on there. Everything CD Projekt Red has done, almost everything CD Projekt Red has done as of late is impressive to me. Everything they did with The Witcher, slowly the slow and steady ascension of those 3 games is ridiculous when you look at like the leap from 1 to 2 and then from 2 to 3 is mind-blowing. And they seem to be like pushing everything they can do, basically going all in on this game, which I think there's a lot about this game we still don't know, which is mind-blowing considering how many times we've seen it. But yeah, I'm super intrigued by it, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot when it comes out in April. The Last of Us 2, I have zero doubts that game is going to be fantastic, just based on Naughty Dog's track record. I'll be interested to see like how dark they choose to push it, because that has been the ongoing conversation swirling around it. Ghost of Tsushima is a game I didn't realize I was hyped for until I went back and rewatched the original trailer they put out I think it was a couple years ago, and then went back and actually started replaying Sekiro. Feudal Japan is a setting that I absolutely love. The fantasy of playing as like a lone samurai wandering the countryside is just something that, kind of like the Gunslinger, it's very similar, and obviously there have been that fiction and that kind of mythology is melded through pop culture over the decades, but it's a world and a history that I'm super interested in. I have Ori on here. I have there was one other that I wanted to make mention of. 12 minutes, which is on Polygon's list.
Yeah.
But 12 minutes is a concept, like it's that Groundhog Day style concept of kind of like you reliving the same 12 minutes over and over again and kind of trying to change the course of events. Time loops are something that have obviously become super popular in games, I think for obvious reasons, but that's a game that's been shown a lot, and I would be remiss if I didn't include it, because I did say I want to play more indie games. And I think outside of that, and I'm sure you guys have these too, there are a lot of games this year that I'm more intrigued by than I am like highly anticipating. Games I just want to see how they shake out, and I probably will play. And so I don't know if you guys have any of those, but I certainly have quite a few. One of them is the next entry in the what is it called? The Dark Pictures anthology, which is coming out. It's supposed to be coming out in 2019.
I didn't think about putting that on my list. That's on my list.
Yeah, I figured you'd probably include it, but I'm super intrigued by the wildly divergent like stylistic choices they're making in terms of subgenres.
Yeah,
I'm far more interested in this subgenre than I was for Man of Medan.
And I think that's going to be the weird thing for their anthology. Like people are going to naturally drift to one or the other in terms of episodes based on their interest in the subgenre of horror it is.
We can talk spoilery about the Man from Medan, right? You think time has passed?
Yeah.
Right? I was super disappointed that it wound up being like, oh, it's all just a hallucination, and it was really easy to.
What? That's such bullshit.
Oh, you didn't realize this?
No. I'm not saying it's bullshit that you spoiled it. I'm saying I hate that shit.
Yeah.
I stopped watching House after
gold.
What's that?
You're looking in the game like you set out to find Manchurian gold, and it turns out that was a code name for a chemical warfare agent that the government was developing that went down on the ship.
Oh my gosh.
And so the way that you deal with the ghosts is you just don't give in to fear, because none of it's real. and with Until Dawn, there was like a kind of, we're going that way, psych, no we're not, there is something out here to be terrified of. So I didn't like that, so I'm really excited to get back into there is something supernatural here, and it will kill you if you mess up. I'm way more excited for this next entry.
I am super upset right now. I stopped watching House after they had that big season finale where he like apparently kills somebody, and then it turns out he was just like hallucinating from the Vicodin that he takes. And I was like, wait a minute, so this, you hyped us up for a whole episode that didn't really happen? I was very upset. So I'm upset about this now.
Yeah,
but I'm definitely, it's a game I'm intrigued by, because as you said, I think the supernatural aspect of these games is something I've always been interested in. I kind of find it draining sometimes when every single aspect of it is supernaturally tied, which is kind of why I actually connected to the end of Man of Medan, because it wasn't, probably because it wasn't Until Dawn. But yeah, I think this gives them a chance to hit the reset button and cook up something new.
Yeah. And the whole like Salem witch connection.
Yeah.
That is just super interesting.
Yeah. That's always it's always a home run with me. I'm not going to play it because I can't, but I'm super interested in the Half-Life VR experience. Just because I think the conversation around that is going to be absolutely hilarious. I think the only other game I have in terms of stuff that I'm just really curious about. Oh no, I have two more. I'm super curious in the Avengers game.
Oh yeah.
I think that could be a glorious disaster. But I also think it's going to hit home with a lot of people just purely based on IP alone. And we still don't. I feel like I don't really know how it plays, even though I know literally on a moment-to-moment basis how it plays. But I want to know more about the overarching structure of it, and the multiplayer aspect. And that's a game I'd love to play with you guys if you're able to pick it up.
For me, that was actually my answer to your next question.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Which is a game that you're not excited for.
That's fine too. I mean,
and
go for it.
The reason why for me is it's so similar to Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Like, it's very different in a lot of ways. But the type of game that it is, like I said this when these games were announced, I don't understand the thought process behind releasing both of these games so close together.
It is the Quad A version of Marvel. Yes. But no, I'm right there with I'm with both of you in the sense that, Larry, from a personal standpoint, I have no interest in playing it. But I'm also very interested in how people respond to this game, because it's funny, like Marvel was there ever a Marvel movie that came out recently, at least, where people were like split on it, like in as vocal a way as they are with like Star Wars?
Not with Star Wars, but there are definitely been some that they've been more tepid on. I think Captain Marvel was one of those.
Okay, yeah, Captain Marvel, but that was like for some bullshit reasons too.
Well, no, I mean not in terms of the blatant misogyny, but just in terms of the movie itself. I think a lot of people were tepid on.
But I feel like overall, Marvel has a ton of goodwill with their fan base. And
there's a formula and it works.
Right. And I'm just not sure how well that's going to translate over to a game. But then I'm like, well, all this goodwill, they can probably just do whatever, and people are just going to be excited that they're playing as fucking Iron Man, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to get a lot of people, a lot of eyes on it, regardless, I think.
Now, it may come out and turn out to be awesome, and I might wind up jumping with you. But I'm worried that it's just going to be like a nicer looking Ultimate Alliance.
Yes.
With less
very
characters.
Possible. Very possible. The last game that I'm like this is a game I'm extremely interested in is Watch Dogs 3. Mostly because
was that even on the list?
It was on it's on a Polygon has an extended list.
How was this not on?
I don't know how it wasn't. Because this game looks fucking rad.
It's because Watch Dogs is not confirmed for 2020 yet, apparently.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think it got delayed. It got delayed to 2020. It had a firm 2020 release date, and then was kind of we don't really know. So it could come out of the tail end. I'm gonna be hopeful that it does, even though I know it probably won't. But this is a game that, on a purely systemic level, I'm really interested in, because I think the ramifications for what it's trying to do could be extremely widespread. More so than, like, I remember when the Shadow of Mordor games came out, I'm like, oh, the Nemesis system is going to be everywhere, and then it didn't turn out to be that. But I think this system has a much, just in terms of a technological leap, and like a systemic leap, I think it could have real ramifications, being able to play as and being able to give it personalities to all these AI characters. And I also just like the Watchdog games in general. So I'm super curious about that one.
Yeah, I love the Watch Dogs games because, oddly enough, of all the games I haven't played this generation, I've played both Watch Dogs games to completion, and I really enjoyed Watch Dogs 2. And
yeah,
I mean, I didn't like all of the things that everybody didn't like about the first Watch Dogs, but so I'm excited about that game too. Not just from that new system standpoint, but just I love the way that it kind of extrapolates on where we're probably heading as far as data and targeting and all that kind of stuff, predictive analytics.
Yeah. It should be a good time. Are there any games that you guys just have, as you said, Larry, with Marvel Avengers, are there any games that you guys just have no interest in whatsoever? And it might just be because you're not impressed by what you see, or it's just kind of totally outside your wheelhouse. I can think of at least one on the list of games that are coming out that I'm just not interested in at all.
Oh, I have one that's a no-brainer for me, and that is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Everybody and their mother is going to be talking about that game, and I'm just going to be playing Team Fight Tactics, all right?
I am on the same.
Betting on low-tier league matches with imaginary currency.
Yeah, that's right.
It's too bad too, because we're going to be hearing about that game for years because they're releasing it episodically.
Oh my god!
Did you say yours is the same game, Cody?
Yeah, I've really had zero interest in Final Fantasy period as a franchise.
Yeah, same here. And this wasn't on their list, but I will continue to be equally disinterested in Call of Duty. And I get that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people play it every year, but for me, it's just that genre is so swamped. And I think there are other people doing that kind of thing better. So we'll still not pick Call of Duty.
Is there anything coming out this year that you guys look at and think that has the potential of being like sneakily a big thing?
I wanted to ask about this
because there's one on my list right here, and I'll answer so that you guys can have a second to think about it. This Roller Champions game. I'm not kidding, guys. This is the like roller derby game from Ubisoft that they revealed at E3.
I don't even remember this.
Oh man,
the one is it the one we were talking about? Like, could this be the next esport or whatever?
Yes,
like
where it looks like it is. Yeah. It looks like it is solely designed to be like a competitive stream this kind of game. But you know, I think about back when like Rocket League went into its beta, you know, and nobody was thinking Rocket League's going to be a big deal. And now Rocket League's like huge, still brings in a ton of money. I mean, Epic went out and paid an assload of money for it. So, yeah, Roller Champions is my game to watch in 2020.
I'm scrolling through the list. And I think I'm going to say that I think Bleeding Edge is going to make a bigger splash than anticipated.
Yeah, I can see that.
Looks kind of goofy. It looks, you know, the cell shading is an option that you don't typically see in some of the most popular games, excluding Borderlands. But I think that formula of this massive, interesting characters in a competitive game, just Overwatch showed us how well that can work.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think they're my vote would be with Bleeding Edge, just based on the PR budget that they can swing with that. But I am curious what you guys think will be by the end of 2020, what game will have been talked about the most, whether for positive reasons or negative reasons.
I think The Last of Us is going to have the most conversation around it. I think Cyberpunk's going to have some weird moments in the conversation. Well, we've already had some weird moments with the conversation around Cyberpunk. And I don't think necessarily the reception on it is going to be mixed. I think mostly people are going to be loving Cyberpunk, but I think that there are going to be things about that game that people write about as not necessarily being comfortable with.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cyberpunk will have a longer tail in terms of the conversation. I think just by virtue of what it's trying and like the scale of it. Sony games are always interesting because or Sony exclusive games are always interesting to me because they seem to have like because of the nature of them, have such a confined window for when they're talked about, and then they're reflected on later at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Last of Us is obviously a game that's stuck with people. since it launched. But I think Cyberpunk will definitely have a lot more think pieces written about it, and I think those will be interesting on a variety of levels. I'm interested to see the discourse of that game in general.
I'm going to go with The Last of Us also, because the first The Last of Us was really a big step forward in the kind of storytelling that could happen in a game. It's one of the first games, I think, where broad discussions were had about how similar this genre had become to filmmaking in some ways. And I think Death Stranding has teed them up for the broader public beginning to understand that games can tell those kinds of stories. And I think that Death Stranding has actually left Sony in a really good place for The Last of Us Part 2 to make a splash even outside of gaming in the terms of what a game can do artistically. So I think you're going to see that game talked about outside of the gaming sphere in a lot of ways.
I think there are going to be a lot of you mentioned you think there's going to be more think pieces written about Cyberpunk, but I feel like there's a conversation around violence that's been happening with The Last of Us in the lead up that may come to fruition when the game actually releases, because I do think that the game is going to be brutal, and I think that it's going to be designed to highlight its brutality in a lot of ways, and I think that that's going to lead to a lot of discussions.
I think it will, and I think there's clearly intentionality put into it, and I'll be interested to see how that is written about and viewed within the actual context of the game and the story that's being told. Because I think we've talked about this before, like showing that game and the violence of that game out of context is really disconcerting to a lot of people. So I'll be interested to see what the conversation is actually once people have played the game in its entirety and whether that shifts or not. I'm sure there'll still be plenty written about the violence of the game. And I'm sure there'll be plenty written about the violence and the violence of bodies in Cyberpunk. I think those two games will actually dovetail nicely in terms of the conversation that's being had.
I also think there's going to be a massive discussion around spoilers.
Yes.
With The Last of Us. I can't think of a game recently that people are going to be more spoiler sensitive to than they will be with 100%. The Last of Us.
I'll be one of those people.
I will as well. I'm already spoiler sensitive, and I'm already really mad at Naughty Dog.
Be mad I have a theory about that, but I won't hit you with it right now.
Okay.
All right.
But yeah, I'm super excited about 2020 in terms of the games that are coming out. I think 2020 is going to be an interesting year overall in games.
I'm excited too, and I'm extra excited because I didn't expect to be excited. I kind of expected everybody to just slow down this console.
There's no reason you're going to be able to play them all on the next one too.
It seems like people are really going pedal to the metal right up until fall, which is cool.